Right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. Today we're going to talk about biggest impressions from week 3. We can talk about some week 4 openers, including Bucs, Eagles, and other games, and then wrap the show up with a handicap of the doubleheader on Monday Night Football. And to help me all with that is Trysta Krick, sports betting personality, fellow Henry David Thoreau fan. Trysta, how was your Sunday?
Oh, it was great. I only a couple of games that I really was way off on, and boy, oh boy, was I wrong about the Buccaneers. Man, I really fumbled the ball on that one. I think a lot of people did though.
Yeah, a lot of survivor pools up in flames between the Bucs and the Browns, in particular. I mean, it was still so early in the season that individual results they take on a little bit of outsized importance. But do you think that is alarm bells for the Bucs, or is that just a one-off kind of throw it out? Bo Nix touched God for a half and move on.
Yeah, I think it has to do more with the desperation of the Broncos than it does the ineptitude or potential alarm bells for the Bucs. But the fact that they got their asses beat, that definitely makes me a little bit concerned, especially for next week.
Yeah, I think, and we'll get into Eagles-Bucs, but I think there was a world where perhaps the Bucs were, a really solid 1.5 points better than your average team type of operation. And now I think today kind of reinforces, as I say, today we're recording during the second quarter of Sunday Night Football. The game's tied 7-7. I think today kind of reinforced that the Bucs are probably a 500 type of team, and the type of team that they were last year, which was good enough to win the division last year, may not be good enough this year with the Falcons, Saints, and the resurgent Andy Dalton Panthers in the NFC South. Let's start off with Ravens-Cowboys, which I think was the game with most fanfare, given that the Ravens are 0-2, the Cowboys 1-1, but coming off getting absolutely stomped by the Saints. The line was around pick, Ravens slight favorite. And then the Ravens blowing them out and then almost bottled it at the end. But they were able to get through it. Lamar Jackson making a couple of plays at the end. What did you make of that game?
I think the main thing is that the Cowboys are just soft. The Cowboys, multiple games, and I'm a Cowboy fan. So I feel very confident. And I almost took the Ravens as my survivor pick this week, but I just felt like it was really bad juju. And it was a sweat down the stretch for a lot of people who did have the Ravens. But you take the Cowboys last week against the Saints and you say maybe that's an aberration at home and they have a get-right spot against the Ravens defense that's really a lot worse than last year. And I think really you see that the Cowboys, they still have real problems with their run defense. Like they allow King Henry 25 attempts on 151 yards and 2 TDs. Like you just can't have that. And Lamar with 87 yards and a touchdown as well. So they got to clean that up. I think the Mike Zimmer defensive coordinator ingratiation is just going to take longer than I think a lot of people thought. And I just don't trust this Cowboys team. Pure and simple, I really don't.
Yeah, and I think to your point about them being soft, like they are kind of literally, physically quite small and kind of soft in a way where just the interior of that defensive line, like it just hasn't been fixed. Like Marzi Smith has been a catastrophe for the team based on where they drafted him, what he's shown so far. I don't understand really why the offense is so out of sync. I know they put up points in the second half when, they were playing against, they were coming from 28-6 down or whatever it was. So it's easier to score and move the ball in that type of environment. But I mean, I don't really understand why CeeDee Lamb is getting disproportionately small amount of targets. I guess he's still a little rusty off of the initial break that he had with missing so much of training camp. But yeah, I think it's alarm bells for the Cowboys in a way. I think they can be comforted by the fact that the division seems quite soft, and the Eagles, even though they seem like the quote-unquote class of the division, they still have their own question marks and they have injuries, and there's just one game, the difference between them. But I think, Trysta, maybe the biggest red flag of all is just how easily the Saints dismantled the Cowboys. And then heading into the fourth quarter, the Saints had like 3 points against the Eagles.
Yeah, I think that kind of tells you the difference between the Cowboys and the Eagles, right? Like I'm very curious to see how these divisional games go as well. On the flip side, though, I did want to say, like, I don't think we can really just say that the Ravens are in the clear either, right? Like you're up 28-6 in the fourth quarter. You can't let Cowboys come back. Like, you can't give them opportunities for the Zebras to get involved either. And that's really what we saw. And that's something that has been the Ravens' bugaboo in the entire Lamar Jackson era, right? Like, struggling to hold on to leads in disastrous form. And that needs to get cleaned up, like, right now. The fact that they even got into that position, and we know that they have issues with their defense as a whole, and we know that they've sometimes struggled to keep Derrick Henry involved. Like, today is a massive sign of improvement, like, establish the run. But in week one, like, there were times where Derrick Henry was sitting on the sideline, and I don't know why.
Yeah, they've decided to just use him as kind of a first 2 downs type of guy, not use him on passing downs. And I think that he is probably going to be the most extreme game script dependent player, maybe in the whole NFL, because when they do have a lead like they did today, then I don't think these games are going to be so out of place where he does have 25 carries or whatever he ended up with, and goes for 150 rushing yards. But if they get down kind of early, somewhat like how they did against the Chiefs, then he's just not going to be super heavily involved. He's still awesome. Like, he's still King Henry, and he can still have these type of games. But I think with the Ravens, the thing is that they were a 13-4 dominant 1 seed last year, and their defense just got worse. Like, they lost Geno Stone and Patrick Queen and Jadeveon Clowney. On defense, they lose Mike McDonald, which is maybe the biggest loss of all. And it's just not the same personnel-wise. The scheme doesn't seem to be as effective. And then the offensive line is worse as well. So just a few things adding up for the Ravens. A couple of games I want to jump to. First, Vikings-Texans, which is perhaps the most surprising result in a way because of the manner of it, where the Texans were 2.5-point favorites for much of the week. The Vikings steamed on Sunday. They closed 1.5-point dogs and then win by 27 points. Are you a believer in the Sam Darnold KOC Vikings, Trysta?
I think I'm buying everything. I think I'm buying everything that they have to sell. I'm looking into Kevin O'Connell, Coach of the Year. I'm flirting with, maybe just based on the price, a little Sam Darnold MVP. I'm flirting with Aaron Jones, Offensive Player of the Year. Brian Flores, we saw what he did with the defense last year. They lose Danielle Hunter. You're wondering whether that's going to be an impactful loss. This Vikings defense is able to pin their ears back and make contenders' lives, really good quarterbacks, MVP caliber quarterbacks, their lives hell. Like Nico Collins, I know you're a huge fan of Nico Collins, as am I. Nico Collins in the first half was on a milk carton. I know he got 84 yards at the end of the game, but like you said, when you're down by 1 million, it's easy for defenses to kind of just sit and chill, and you kind of get those yards in garbage time. So that's really what I saw. Defense from Minnesota is for real. You now have a sample size of 2, and I know that's small, but that's against the Niners, and that's against this Houston team as well. And then offensively, Aaron Jones looks really good. Looks like one of the better signings running back wise in the league. 102 yards rushing, 46 yards through the air, 5 receptions and a touchdown. And on top of that, we haven't really discussed this as a whole, but this really shows that who you're coached by, the scheme that you're coached by as a quarterback, impacts who you are, what your legacy looks like, and what we say about you as a quarterback. Sam Darnold was zipping the ball to Justin Jefferson. He looked really good. So yeah, I'm all in. Like, not all in, Super Bowl all in, but I'm all in to win the division. I mean, as many things as you can give me, Jay, I'd be interested in at least exploring.
Yeah, I think Kevin O'Connell probably warrants being Coach of the Year favorite. There's a few early strong candidates there between O'Connell, Mike McDonald, as a first-year coach who's 3-0 in Seattle, and all of a sudden bizarrely has a 2-game lead on the Niners for the division. I wouldn't write off Jim Harbaugh yet. Weird loss for the Chargers and Herbert not healthy, but he probably drops a little bit of a tier. And then Matt LaFleur as well. I think we'll have a very strong case. But I think Kevin O'Connell probably has the cleanest case right now, just because if he wins a loaded division with Sam Darnold as his quarterback, then he will get all the credit in the world. And the key in Coach of the Year is always, you need a coach who exceeds expectations while not having a superstar quarterback who steals the credit. And Sam Darnold's not going to steal the credit from Kevin O'Connell. People are going to see that as Kevin O'Connell fixing Sam Darnold, or at least putting Sam Darnold in a position to succeed. I'm still a little bit skeptical of Darnold in that I think Darnold is fine, and I think he could even be good, but I think it'll be good in like the way that Jared Goff has been in Detroit. That type of good, which is fine enough, and they can win the division with that. But Darnold, and he's kind of gotten away with it the past 2 games, but he does have these little moments of Sam Darnold madness, the seeing ghost, where he's like one click away from making a Will Levis type of play, and he's just gotten away with it a little bit. So I think that is going to cost them some games that they should otherwise win. But I mean, he's fine. Today he was 0.14 EPA per play. That's perfectly fine. But I think the story, and you mentioned it, just this defense, like Brian Flores may just be a god because I don't understand how this defense has been so dominant with the personnel that they have, but they were very solid last year, and a lot of it was smoke and mirrors, and now it's like they've actually got some oomph behind the smoke and mirrors. CJ Stroud was negative 0.31 EPA per play today, so basically every time CJ Stroud dropped back, they were losing a third of a point. And I think the thing with Stroud and the Texans offense that's really interesting is that even like last year, like again, CJ Stroud, like you look at it, like he looks like Jesus Christ. Like he looks amazing by the eye test when he's out there. But then the underlying stats are like, they're always like fine, but I think he was 13th in PFF grade last year. I think he was around like 14th, 15th in EPA per play. He got away with a lot of turnover-worthy plays that were just dropped picks, and there was another really bad drop pick today. He should have had 3 instead of 2. So are you concerned at all about the Texans and particularly their offense, or do you think that Stroud is just too good and they will right the ship?
I think I'm really concerned about the Joe Mixon injury. I don't think, based on what we've seen with Cam Akers last year and the year before that in the LA Rams system, like I don't think McVay lets guys go that are as serviceable as I think people on the broadcast are saying Cam Akers are. Like Cam Akers is. A lot of people were saying, oh, maybe he was just abandoned and we can't figure out why Sean McVay didn't want to use him. And there was a lot of drama and smoke surrounding that. But honestly, like you got Joe Mixon for a reason. So if that high ankle sprain continues to be an issue, then yeah, like I'm concerned about that. I want to see Tank Dell get involved a little bit more. I don't think I'm concerned. I think it's a wait and see. Now we have 2 weeks in a row where CJ Stroud was shut down, but you're talking about really, really good defenses. The Bears defensively, I know we're going to talk about them a little bit later. The Bears defensively are for real.
Yep. No, the Bears, they are very solid defensively. The offense is another question. Let's quickly hit that game because I think that was one of the more instructive games of the early window. Perhaps not so instructive with Caleb Williams, who kind of reinforced, I think, what he had done the previous 2 weeks, albeit with kind of juicier volume passing stats. Like he shows all the flashes. I think he's definitely going to be good, but he makes a lot of bad decisions at the moment and just misses balls. But to me, Trysta, what was most interesting about this game is that Anthony Richardson just looks terrible. And he just makes these, like the picks today were atrocious, both of them. And I'm just not sure that he can oversee like a average to good NFL offense. And I wonder, like I believe in Shane Steichen. I think Steichen is by any measure kind of one of the 3 to 5 best offensive minds, play callers in the league. But I'm not sure how you can scheme around the fact that Anthony Richardson just can't make throws. He had a 58% completion percentage in college. He's like 50% every week, it feels like, in the NFL. And I wonder if there is going to be some sort of just kind of necessary revolution with this offense where all of a sudden like Jonathan Taylor's getting 25 carries a game or something, because they need to figure out how to put Richardson in position to succeed and not have him rely on these 60-yard bombs.
Yeah, the issue to me is I was talking to James Boyd about this from The Athletic, who covers the Colts, and the team just loves AR. They just will ride with him. They say he's a dog. They love his work ethic. They love all the intangibles. But it's very clear when you're watching this game on TV or in the stadium, like the decision-making quality that Anthony Richardson is supposed to possess, he does not possess. You're talking about throwing into triple coverage. What are you seeing? I don't really understand what it was he was doing out there. And that game got a lot closer than it probably should have. And I also have big concerns about the Bears running game. If you want to get to that, I'm certainly happy to. But the fact that DeAndre Swift is averaging less than 2 yards per carry against one of the worst defenses, rush defenses in the league. we've got to really have a discussion about what they're doing with Chicago with the play calling and what the running game is going to look like. Khalil Herbert was really not used. It was just Rashawn Johnson and DeAndre Swift. Just very weird stuff.
Yeah, I think my man Nate Tice on Football 301 podcast, which is excellent, he said it best where I think he said last week that Shane Waldron is on fraud watch because Waldron, look at like Seattle's defense, I think has kind of been brought into modernity a little bit without Waldron. I don't think anyone is really happy with what's going on in Chicago from a scheme perspective yet. I mean, it's early, rookie quarterback, all that offensive line, I don't think has been great either. But yeah, some concerns that perhaps Waldron is not the guy. With Richardson, like he reminds me, and it's a very strange comparison because they're nothing alike, but his picks, they remind me of the throws that like Nick Mullins was making at the end of last year, where you just do like a double beat, and it's like that's not like a throw that you see in the NFL typically. And he had 2 of them today. So look, I think all the film room guys and everything, they all say that, you know, Richardson makes some next level decisions, and there is definitely a lot there. Clearly has all the physical gifts, not writing him off. This is like what his 7th game of his NFL career. It's just right now it's looking a little bit dicey, but hopefully it improves. All right. It's a battle of AFC powers in Baltimore when Josh Allen and the Bills head south to face Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Coverage of the matchup begins at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right. Week 4 openers from BetMGM. Were there any in particular that grabbed your eye, Trysta?
I thought the Vikings-Packers line was interesting only because I just wonder whether it's priced with Jordan Love in the mix or whether this line is, you know, under the assumption that Malik Willis is going to start. I think Malik Willis, ironically, may be a more difficult quarterback for the Vikings specifically to deal with than Jordan Love. He looked really good out there using his legs, and Vikings traditionally over the course of time have struggled to defend these dual threat quarterbacks, shifty quarterbacks like Malik Willis. Malik Willis looked really good today. We didn't talk about that game, but man, Matt LaFleur using Malik Willis, he looked like a legitimate starter in this league. So I'm fascinated to see where this line moves as we get more injury information. It's a stay away for me, Packers -2.5. But say if it's Malik Willis, or say if it's Jordan Love and the line moves Packers -3.5, I'd be interested in maybe jumping on a little Vikings.
Yeah, I think what the line is reflecting is that Love will play, but he might not be 100%, and probably, you know, 75% of Jordan Love in theory may still be better than Malik Willis. I think with LaFleur, and in terms of ways to bet the Packers, I think people are probably going to overreact a little bit to LaFleur and his Coach of the Year price at the moment, because they're going to be obsessed with him being 2-0 with Malik Willis. Like, come the first week of January when the season ends, Malik Willis is not going to be fresh in people's minds, and it's going to help LaFleur, but he's going to be judged on what he does with Jordan Love. And that's why I kind of think that for LaFleur to win Coach of the Year, he probably needs to get the 1 seed, and then like getting the 1 seed, having, you know, missed Jordan Love for a couple of weeks and won both games without him and then surging home. Like, that's a Coach of the Year case, but just like winning the division at 12-5 or whatever, like I don't think that's going to do it for LaFleur. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible what they've done, the competence they've gotten out of Malik Willis, given what he looked like when he was in Tennessee. I think the most interesting thing about this line is just the continued disrespect towards the Vikings. Like, it was very strange to me that they were 2.5-point dogs for pretty much the entirety of the week home to Houston, where you just like stack up. All right, so how is the market power rating these teams? Is it saying if you're valuing home field advantage is about 2 points, is it saying that like the Texans are 3.5 points better than your average team and the Vikings are like a neutral to negative team? Is it saying that I just didn't really understand how you could make the Vikings like a materially negative team, and I also didn't understand how you could make Houston like a superpower. So I wonder if this will be the week where after such an emphatic victory that things start to shift in the Vikings direction. Certainly at current prices, I would be backing the Vikings +2.5, even with the expectation that Love probably gives it a go, given that it seemed like he was close. Next one, Trysta, Steelers-Colts. Colts 1.5-point favorites at home. Do you agree with the market saying that these teams are basically neck and neck on neutral?
I don't at all. I think what we're seeing with the Steelers is some market disrespect too, right? Like, I know that Justin Herbert had the injury. I know that he had to sit down, but still that defense, that Steelers defense is legit. And we saw what Anthony Richardson, we talked about it a little bit earlier on the show, but as soon as you put pressure in Anthony Richardson's face, he starts to make crazy decisions. I think the Steelers should be favored, even though they're on the road. I really do. Justin Fields is feasting in Pittsburgh. They're 3-0. The Colts saved their season with the win over the Bears. Like I said, Anthony Richardson continues to just make bad play after bad play, and then these incredible throws where you've got this roller coaster. So TJ Watt's going to put a ton of pressure on him. And so he's throwing off his back foot in the red zone because Montez Sweat's bearing down on him, gets easily picked off. I could see that happening again against the Steelers. So to me, at this price, it's probably Steelers money line for me.
Okay. Yep. Looks like it's already flipping. So that makes sense. I don't understand really the market respect around the Colts, given that they don't have any cornerbacks. They had more players get injured today on defense, and just with how poor Richardson looks at the moment, certainly I think the Steelers deserve to be favored there. Next one for us, Eagles 2.5-point favorites at the Bucs, a fairly dramatic reversal from the Eagles being 2.5-point dogs at the Saints. Devontae Smith got concussed. Not sure what his status is going to be for this one. A.J. Brown, maybe 50-50 to play. He's expected to be out for a couple of weeks, they said, on the Monday night broadcast against the Falcons. So this will be at the end of that kind of couple of weeks type of frame. He didn't practice at all leading up to the game against the Saints. Very kind of impressive gutty win from the Eagles, much to my chagrin as a man holding a lot of Saints, NFC, and Super Bowl, but that's okay. The Super Bowl is played in February, so there is still time to fix that. Any interest in betting either side in this game?
Not really. I mean, the Eagles, that feels like a fair line, -2.5, total 46.5. I mean, Philadelphia looked obviously much better, but I think if Bo Nix, and maybe this is more to do like I said earlier, the desperation of the Broncos, but if Bo Nix was able to scamper the way that he was in this game against the Buccaneers, Jalen Hurts should be able to do the same thing. My main concern that's keeping me away is obviously the A.J. Brown and the Devontae Smith injury. Like, I'm very concerned. He looked like he was very concussed. He was down for a while. So, yeah, I don't really have much interest in betting this game at the price right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this will largely depend on the availability of those two receivers. Agree with your point about Devontae Smith. I mean, finger in the air, I'd probably say that he's slightly unlikely to play, just given that the nature of the concussion, as you mentioned, and the fact that typically when guys leave games with concussions, they usually miss 1 week. I believe that's the norm. So, yeah, probably expecting him not to play. And then we'll see with A.J. Brown. I think this is an interesting rematch of the playoff game last year, which was the nadir of the Sirianni experience. I'm not sure Sirianni covered himself in glory on Sunday either, but he got bailed out by Saquon Barkley, and then Marshawn Lattimore, I think, running into his own safety to leave Dallas Goedert wide open for a 60-yard pass down the left sideline. So I think it'll be interesting just with Bowles, how often he blitzes and how the blitz has historically rattled Jalen Hurts. I think this will be a really good test to see if Hurts has corrected his ills against the blitz. Last couple here, two I want to throw by you. Niners are 10.5-point favorites at the Pats, and the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, they are 5.5-point favorites at the Giants. Any of these games particularly interesting to you?
The Niners line is interesting to me because you've got McCaffrey injury issues, Debo injury issues, Kittle, and obviously Juwan Jennings looked great, 3 touchdowns for him, but like, how sustainable is that? 10.5-point favorites against a Patriots team that I know isn't any good. Just 10.5 is too much for almost anyone. I think I'm like not going to take the Niners as more than a touchdown favorites against anyone until all their guys are back. So if anything, it would be Patriots at plus 10.5. That's just a huge line, especially considering that over touchdown underdogs right now are killing it against the spread.
Yep. We'll see about some Niner availability. I know Trent Williams got banged up. I think he came back in And we'll see what the Patriots offensive line situation as well, given that has been a bit of a nightmare. I don't think that the Giants should be 5.5-point dogs against the Cowboys, just based on what they've put up so far. That implies that the Cowboys, traveling short week, that they are like 7.5 points better on neutral than the Giants. I just don't think the gap is quite that big between those two teams. So my bet through kind of gritted teeth would be on the New York Football Giants to cover that on the short week at home. All right, dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, stats, advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code season20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, Monday Night Football, Jags, Bills. Bills 5.5-point favorites. This has ticked up. It was 4.5 for a time. The total is 45.5. Jags, kind of the impending disaster team. Every Jags fan wants Press Taylor out of town and someone to fix the offense. And the Bills, extra rest coming off that Thursday night game against Miami. Anything you like in this game, Trysta?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to hold my nose on a side, I think I have some player props that I like. But if you look at the trend of 0-2 teams covering the number in week 3, the number's pretty staggering. And I think you look at Trevor Lawrence, and I think there's some positive regression coming for Trevor Lawrence. Like, he had an ugly, gross weather game, and then they almost got the week 1 win against the Dolphins as well. Christian Kirk was garbage. I think he had -1 yard receiving last week. Evan Ingram was held out. So I think the question really is, like, how good is this Bills defense and how gettable is this Bills defense? And I think what we saw with the Tua injury and what we saw in week 1 against the Cards is that we really don't know anything about their Bills defense. So I think if it was me, I would lean on Travis Etienne and push that rush defense vulnerability to the max. But again, like, the Bills right now in terms of their offense are clicking in all cylinders, playing really good complementary football, kind of pick your poison against them. So if I had to do anything, it would just be based on the trend, and I would take the Jags plus 5.5.
Yeah, I think the Bills' defense is still some question marks, though. My man, Damar Hamlin, is holding it down in the secondary, led the team in tackles, and had a TFL against the Dolphins.
Great story.
Deal, Trysta. Yeah, it's an amazing story. No one cares, but amazing story that he came back from the dead. Now leading the team in tackles, but that's okay. We'll give Aaron Rodgers comeback player of the year this year. You mentioned some player props that you like. Anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we know about the Jags is they just can't defend the middle of the field. Like, just haven't been able to do that. Their linebackers can't defend in coverage really at all. So for me, it's Khalil Shakir over 45.5 receiving yards there. I think if you can get Dalton Kincaid at a good price for maybe some receiving yards for him, I didn't see what that was. I didn't see if it was off the board, but tight ends, a good spot against this Jags team as well. 2 bad weeks for him, really, like very underwhelming performances. So tight ends, I think James Cook in the receiving game as well. Kind of just middle of the field against the Jags is what I would do. But Khalil Shakir is my favorite bet.
Yep, I like that. I think on the other side of the ball, I think that Brian Thomas is going to continue to emerge as Trevor Lawrence's number one option. He did not get many targets at all in week 2. So his stat line, I think he still had 94 receiving yards, but it was on 2 catches. So that's not the greatest indicator of what's sustainable going forward. But he's out there and playing a ton of snaps. And I think if there is a way to, if you're going to predict ways that this offense gets fixed, I think Brian Thomas, just being the most talented skill position player and someone who seems ready to contribute, given that he basically cooked the Dolphins in week 1. And if not for getting mugged in the end zone by Jalen Ramsey, he would have had 5 for 88 and 2 touchdowns. So I think Brian Thomas, who's set in the low 40s as a receiving prop, going up against my man Damar Hamlin in the secondary, might be a bit overmatched for a deep ball against Brian Thomas Jr. I would look into that. They're all clustered. Like Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, they all basically have the same prop. Which is, I think, the market just kind of hedging its bets. But of those 3 guys, if there is one most likely to explode, I think it is Brian Thomas. Let's head to Commanders-Bengals. Bengals 7.5-point favorites, trying to avoid going 0-3, which would probably be a death knell for their season. The total is 47 flat. Anything you like in this game?
I'd have to hold my nose and take Washington plus 7.5. It's just so ugly. Again, this is a lean. I've got a couple of player props I like a little bit more, especially considering how bad the Washington pass defense has been for the last multiple years now. But obviously, like you said, must win for Cincinnati. T. Higgins is back. But honestly, like 7.5 for a Bengals team that hasn't looked good against really a bad team in the Patriots. And it felt like a little bit of like Burrowhead in week 2. So for me, it would be Washington plus 7.5, but I like Mike Gesicki over 2.5 reception. He feels like the guy right now for Joe Burrow, especially when you had T. Higgins coming back from injury. Jamar Chase has been getting a lot of man coverage and has been getting largely shut down. So I like Gesicki over 2.5 receptions, but I also like over 45.5 receiving yards for T. Higgins coming back. He says he feels great. I'd even sprinkle a little bit on the anytime touchdown as well. If he feels good, I think they should be able to eat against the Washington defense that has been giving up a ton of yards to wide receiver 1s and 2s. Yeah,
this is probably the worst secondary in the league in Washington, certainly in that discussion. And I think, like, it doesn't sound very sharp to give out a Jamar Chase over, but he said at 80.5. I'm not sure that is high enough. I think the combination of getting open deep against this Washington secondary that gives up a ton of explosives. They turned Baker Mayfield into the second coming of Christ in week 1, and then they made Daniel Jones look very competent in week 2. So I think that it might be a little bit of an overcorrection as well to feeding Jamar Chase targets after he's had a bit of a rough start to the season. And I think that watching that Chiefs game, the Chiefs they slanted all their defensive coverages to shut down Jamar Chase and made Josephus and the other guys beat them. I think with T. Higgins back, there's a little bit more space perhaps for Jamar Chase, and I think that he will go over 80.5. And I think that Burrow showed enough. I know there were concerns about Burrow's health. He looked fine against Kansas City. He just looked like Joe Burrow. They probably should have won that game. So I think that Burrow and Chase, they get right against the Commanders, which is the ultimate get right tonic in the NFL to play the Commanders secondary.
Yeah, one more prop I would give out is Joe Burrow over 1.5 TDs as well. I think that's slightly minus money, like minus 135, but we know how good Burrow is against the blitz. Dan Quinn is kind of the king of the blitz so far this season, 4th most in the league the last 2 weeks. So I kind of like Joe Burrow over 1.5 touchdowns as well.
Yep, I like that. I think as well that the Bengals have shown they have an extremely high pass rate over expectation. I think it might even be top of the league. So they are throwing over expectation. So I think that will help Burrow and Chase compile stats. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining me tonight, Trysta. Anything that you want to plug? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X at Trysta_Krick, TRYSTA_KRICK, Instagram, TRYSTA_KRICK. Yep. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Trysta.
Thanks.
We are done for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with Drew, but for now, don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Thanks again to Trysta Krick for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.